Hi, how you all doing? I was sitting here this morning and I was busy. I had a meditation, beautiful meditation this morning before I got started with work, and I was sitting here busy, sort of channeling and getting ready for sending out my weekly message from Spirit, which is probably a lovely way for me to start my Mondays, is to connect with Spirit and send out a message that is validating and reaffirming for the week. And as I was sitting here doing that, I kept getting the message to do a video and talk about this concept. I posted a Facebook post last week sometime about it, and I also put it on Instagram, around what you create creates you. And this is these are words that dropped into my consciousness last week sometime when I was meditating, and it really is causing quite a lot of disruption in my own thought process. And this is the reason that I've been guided to speak to you about it, is to start to become aware of what are you putting out in the world, what are you creating, because every time you create something, it creates you. It's quite a powerful thing to become aware of. The image that is given to me by Spirit is almost the infinity symbol that works through us, as if you had to imagine this is your body, this being the midpoint, your feet and your head is the infinity symbol, sort of connects with Spirit above you and below you, and each time you take a step, each time you create something, you are putting something out in the world, and that got this feedback loop back into you, and then so it continues. There's this feedback of, as I take steps and as I create in the world, so I am impacted by it, and so it impacts me in the world, and that informs my next step. We know this, and it kind of puts into perspective the importance of the present moment and the steps we take each moment. And I've spoken about this before on many of the weekly messages from Spirit. But when you actually think about what you're creating creates you, for me, that feels like a very profound statement of impact. And as I've been reflecting on it, I became quite aware of my own path. Many of you may know a little bit about my story, some of you may not. Is I previously was in the corporate world. I worked for an investment bank for 17 years. I was a financial accountant, and then left that world about 11 years ago to start my own coaching practice, which I'm now very grateful to run with my best friend, Michelle. And then my spiritual journey started about 7 years ago, when I woke up quite dramatically when my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident. And I now found myself at a point where I'm actually choosing to step into the spiritual part of my work more full-time and step away from the coaching and corporate practice that I run, which for me is a scary step. Many people think doing this work means that when you make personal changes, it's easier. That's not true. It's still a huge leap of faith and a big step to take. But I digress. That's not the point of this talk. This talk is really reflecting on, as I looked back, I really became aware of how every time I took a step, I created something, how I personally was impacted and evolved through that transformation. And one of the things that is quite a practical way to talk about that is, when I started to awaken to the spiritual path and to my spiritual gifts, I don't like to call it that, one of the things I kept being inspired to do, this was before I was doing any of the work I do now, but I was inspired to start creating cards. And when I say inspired, for me, inspiration is when an idea drops into your consciousness and it just plagues you. It's like, it's just one of these little lingering ideas that moves your spirit. That's the inspiration part, but doesn't leave. So it's not like a random thought that just comes through and says, oh, it'd be cool to make that for dinner. It's more around make cards. And I kept like, what cards? And I don't know what, I don't even think I'm particularly talented artistically. I don't know what to put in the cards, etc., etc. And I resisted this for quite a period of time. And then I went on a silent retreat. And if you want to face your thoughts, silent retreat is going to do it. And I was on a 2-day or 3-day silent retreat. And on the second day, I kept being given, kept having the same thought, just draw the cards. And so eventually all I had with me is a piece of paper or an art book, like a little notebook thing, and I had a couple of pencil crayons and a pen, and I went and sat outside on the grass, and I started my very first card. I had no idea that I was creating it. Let me find that one for you. So these are the set of cards many of you have seen on the videos and on Facebook. But this is the card that came up. It's time to start creating the life you want to live. Now, when I drew the card, I had no consciousness of what I was drawing. Literally, I, made a square and put my pen on the paper, and it flowed. I know that sounds quite random to say it that way, but it's a thing called automatic channeling, automatic writing. And so this is the card that came up. And I remember looking at it and thinking, okay, so I have a card. Now what must I do with it? And I literally showed the people at the workshop, because that was when we broke silence. And on the next day, the next card happened. Let me see if I can find the next one for you. I really can't remember the entire order of all of them. But the first two are useful. The next card that came up is, it is safe for you to receive. And so here I was with these two thoughts and images that had just flowed out of me. And I kept them. I put them out where I was doing some of my spiritual work and on my altar. And these thoughts started to evolve into my consciousness. And it's time to start creating the life you want to live. Started to prompt me into, so what is the life I want to live, and what do I want to do? And I started to get messages, and I started to meditate and channel messages around this card. And so the same started to happen. And quite spontaneously, over a period of probably, I don't know, a year and a half, if not longer, the rest of the cards emerged. Sometimes I would sit down in a real flurry and 3 or 4 cards would emerge. Sometimes I'd go for weeks and there was no card. And then, it was literally these ideas would drop into my mind, and I'd be told that's a card. And as I was drawing that card, I was taught about spiritual laws and spiritual principles. And so everything I learned about surrender and everything that helped me on my own journey came through a message on one of these cards. And I kept being told that these are the cards for surrender to your soul. Now, please know, I had no intentional purpose for these cards. I had no desire to create a pack of cards. It wasn't a goal that was in my agenda. It was something I was just inspired to create. And I had no idea of what to do with them at all. And then when I was asked by Spirit to start doing readings, I remember sitting with a woman who was my coach and healer and support mechanism at that point in time, a wonderful woman. And I still said, I don't know what to do. I keep being told to do readings, but I don't know what to do. And she said, use the cards. Duh. And so that's what I did. I started doing readings with the cards. I converted my scraps of paper into these cards, and I started to do it. And really, these were the cards that have informed my entire journey until this point in time. I would do readings with the cards. When I started my Facebook group, I used to post a card. When I do the weekly message from Spirit, I use the card. And I would think at this point that I would know these cards quite intimately, and that I know what the message is going to be when I pull a card. But every time I pull the card and channel on that card, a new nuance, a new dynamic, a new message comes through. When I decided to start running healing workshops, the workshops were designed around the cards. The one coming up this week is called Step Into Your Full Power, which is based on this card. So I kind of, I kept saying to Spirit, I don't know what to focus on in the workshops, and the message I got was, use the cards. Here's the Step Into Your Full Power card. So this is what we're going to be working on this Saturday. And so I really used this story, and I hope it's a meaningful story for you, to reflect on how every time I created something, it created me. And how that has been a true part of my journey. Every time I've created a workshop with my Lift in the Veil program, I created the advert for it. And every time I stand up and train it, I get created. Something changes in me because the presence of delivering what I'm creating, when I create the manual, something shifts me. When I stand up and create the space for people to experience the training, something changes in me. And I just love this idea of what you create creates you. And I've used it very practically around the workshops and the tools and things that I've done. But when we take this teaching into a greater level of awareness, when you create your home, it creates the space for you to be you. When you create a meal, it's creating what you're going to eat. When you create an altar, it's creating an intentional space of what you're going to be doing. When you create your desk, when you create a relationship, every time you create something, when you create your garden, when you create by baking, when you create by making jewelry, when you create, every time you create something, it shifts reality. It transforms the world. It's like you've given birth to a little piece of your soul. And by doing that, by expressing it out in the world, it has no other way to do anything but the feedback loop back into you, and that informs what's next. Now, this is equally important to think of when we're creating anger and creating misery and creating heartbreak and I really am a huge believer and teacher of boundaries and saying no. But the energy with which we create is as important as what we create in ourselves. If I'm creating a meal, and this is one of my biggest challenges, I'm not a fan of cooking. And so there is a difference when I create a meal with patience and love and tenderness and even intention, to the meal I just throw together at the end of the day and just like, oh, there's some food to eat. There is a big difference in the energy of it. And so I really am drawn to reflect on this concept a lot more, is how the things I'm creating are creating a space around me, and how it impacts the life I am, and how it creates who I am in this life. And so, I was called to make this video, and I hope sharing this brings you to awareness and thoughts around what is it that you are creating, and allow yourself to create more just with the intention of joy, with peace, with love. The world needs so much more joy. Your world needs more joy. My world needs more joy. We need more love, more peace. And so whatever it is that you create with peace and love and joy, it creates you as a peaceful, loving, and joyful person. And so that's the message for today. I hope that inspires you in some way. Sending you lots of love and peace and joy. Namaste.